Hello, this is Minder Chen. I'm professor of Management Information System at Smith School of Business Economics, CSU, Channel Island. This is our second lecture on organizational culture. And culture, or the fostering of organizational culture, is part of the organizing management function, and also it's part of the leading management function. Leaders in any organization has a strong influence over the creation and the maintenance of its organizational cultures. And culture certainly is the people's perspective of an organization. We're going to discuss in this lectures to help you to understand the creation and maintenance of organizational culture and the factors that create and maintain organizational cultures. If you understand these factors, then potentially you can certainly change the organizational culture if needed. Culture is not a static thing. It evolves over time. And sometimes unintentionally, sometimes we could plan the culture change. Last, we're going to talk about something called personal organizational fit, which means that yourself or from the organizational viewpoint, we have to look at whether the some of our personal preference characteristic is a good fit for a certain organizational culture profile. Let's first kind of address the issue in terms of the challenges of a strong culture. A lot of organization has a very distinct culture or strong cultures. Most of the time, it's a good thing to have a strong culture, but depends on the industry type, on the economic conditions, and also the leadership style. Strong culture may backfire. Culture or a strong culture can be difficult to build. It takes time to foster culture, and it takes time or even more time to change cultures. And however, I do believe that an organizational culture can be easily destroyed by particular top leaderships. Strong culture can be difficult to change when companies face very disruptive change in the environment in which they need to adapt, and part of the adaptation process is to change its culture. But if you have a strong culture, then it sticks, and it's very difficult to change accordingly. So it can become a liability, and particularly during mergers arrangement that two different cultures may need to merge together. That's a typical situation. However, based on my research that, for instance, Amazon acquired Zappos quite a few years ago. I believe maybe it's 2011. However, Amazon kept Zappos runs as a more or less independent company. I think it's a smart move because Amazon and Zappos has very different cultures. Zappos, we discussed, has a very human-centered culture, service-oriented orientations. Although Amazon certainly focus on customer and provide good service, but they believe in using technology to improve the service. Zappos believe that if they can have happy employees, they will serve the customer and deliver happiness. And so certain merchandise may need a lot of hand holdings. Zappos has been doing a great job in selling them online. Amazon is good in selling other type of merchandise with great success. But Jeff Bezos, which is CEO of Amazon's smart enough to know not to mess up Zappos culture. And so far, this arrangement has been working out pretty well. And I would like to recommend an animation movie called Groot. I believe it's by DreamWorks. It's kind of described in the caveman society that there's a strong culture of not exploring the world because danger's out there. However, the environment changed dramatically, and eventually the Groot's family need to change its behavior, and that change doesn't come easy. Another animated movie is Lego Story. It's an interesting one. Lego, in the movie, I remember that to some extent in the Lego society, we emphasize standardization, innovation is not that greatly promoted. And certainly if you play Lego, you know you have a lot of freedom and flexibility in creating whatever you want. However, the movie tried to show how this standardization and innovation potentially may coexist. It's also an interesting movie. A lot of times I found those animated movies were well made and deliver very good message for manager as well. Okay, this is a key slide, so pay attention to it. It's about the process, I guess we can call it the process of creating and maintaining organizational cultures. And there's 2 steps in the process, creating culture, maintaining culture, and eventually changing the cultures. The maintaining part of it include changing culture if needed. So let's look at the factors that affecting the organizational cultures. Remember that the goals, the assumption, the values certainly are part of the organizational culture. Particular value and assumption are the invisible part of the culture. Remember the iceberg model for organizational culture. And this value and assumptions primarily were formed because of the founders or founding members' value and preference. It may also shaped by the demands from the particular industry they're in. For instance, like Foxconn is a contract manufacturing industry, and so they have a more military style of cultures. And once you create those value and assumption in the early stage of the creation of your company and its culture, then there are other factors which also contribute to partially the creation and also the maintenance of the cultures. They are 6 factors, and sometimes we group this 3, which is attraction, selection, attrition of employee, as one aspect or factor of culture's maintenance. It's about the employee, human resource function, how you attract the type of people with proper attitude, personality, and skill set to your organization, how you select the applicant, and attrition is about how you potentially need to let some people go because there's no proper cultural fit or the performance failed the expectation. Onboarding is partially orientation for new employee. So in part of the onboarding process, we try to instill the organizational culture to the new employee. Leadership is very important. The leaders is like the wing, and then the subordinate, the employees, like the grass. When the wind blows through the grass bend. I'm actually paraphrasing a Chinese saying by Confucius, which really try to say the leader actually has a lot of influence over an organizational culture. The rewarding system certainly help to shape an organizational cultures. Money does talk and affect people's behavior and affect the culture. And certainly the culture would certainly may affect our attraction, selection, attrition process as well. Just an example, Ben and Jerry, which produce famous ice cream, its founder, I believe it's Ben and Jerry, are very active in promoting social activism. If I remember correctly, in Ben and Jerry, at least it used to that the CEO and the employee at the front line in their manufacturing facility, the salary difference is no more than 7 times difference. And certainly, in a lot of organizations, the CEO is making millions of dollars for salary and perk and some other stock option bonuses. So the difference is much more than what Ben and Jerry's is. And the social activisms help distinguish Ben and Jerry from the other larger brands in the ice cream categories. The values were retained as part of the corporate culture and taught to new members as the right way to do things. And the fostering of the culture can be intentionally, or it just happen, it evolve over time. Remember, culture tends to be invisible. So a lot of time people just unconsciously doing things and collectively, and over time it became part of the culture. And as we mentioned that industry demand may foster culture in the early stage of an organization and continue influence in organizational cultures. Some industries have their competitive requirement that fit certain organizational cultures better than others. So to some extent, once again, this is kind of the contingency theory. There's in the broader sense, there's really no best culture. It depends on your industry and the demand of your industries. And as an example, most high-tech industries require relentless change and creativity to be competitive. So innovative culture are more likely to be effective than stable cultures. We'll talk about different dimensions of culture, and one is innovative culture, the other is stable cultures. So for instance, Google, Facebook tends to have more innovative cultures. Amazon, I would say, does exhibit innovative culture, but Amazon also has a very disciplined and detail-oriented cultures, and if you read some of the unauthorized biography of Jeff Bezos, you would understand a little bit more about Amazon's culture. If you're a nonprofit serving organization serving abuse survivor, may need to show supportiveness and respect of individual to be successful. So a very supportive kind of cultures, even internally, will reflect in terms of how you serve your customer, quote unquote. So you need a more people-oriented cultures that may be more effective in this case than aggressive culture. In maintaining culture, one aspect of it is the ASA framework, which is attraction, selection, and attrition framework. It describes pretty much the HR function, how an organization attract the kind of the people they would like to attract to apply for jobs, and what's their selection process in selecting employee which may share similar assumption and value with the organizations, and also the attritions, people who may have a different assumption value and didn't really work out within the organization, and you need to figure out a way to kind of let them go through performance evaluations and or some force ranking system, which is a term regarding laying off maybe 5% of the people every year. That's called force ranking. The end result is organizations made up people who share the assumption of value embedded in the organizational cultures. This usually happen naturally without intending to do so. Onboarding, we mentioned, is also part of the factor affecting an ongoing evolution of organizational cultures. In the onboarding process, employees learn the attitude, knowledge, skill, behavior required to function effectively within this organization, which they are new. Certainly the formal orientation program can be very useful. Orientation program may run from 1 day even to 1 week. Zappos, I believe they have a 4 weeks programs, kind of like onboarding orientation program. They rotate the employee new hired through different business function. Like the call center, accounting, HR. At the end of the 4 weeks training orientation, they actually give the new hire opportunity to quit. They actually pay them to quit if they found that there's no right fit, right personal organizational fit, which will address that. But this is a good example regarding company who take this culture fit very seriously. In this case, not just in their selection, but through their onboarding process, they give the employee, the new hire, opportunity to leave if they don't find there's a fit. And I remembered of a former student of mine, Joseph, 1 year that he was in charge of the business club, and he helped to organize a trip to Las Vegas. And actually, I recommended they visit Las Vegas, which is not really to visit the gambling casino, but because of Zappos. This was about almost 10 years ago. And he did a wonderful job in organizing it. But Joseph, if you know Joseph, is kind of a discipline-oriented detail guy, and he told me that he didn't really like Zappos' culture that much because he don't think Zappos was well run and people seems to enjoy too much of their work. There's not much of the rules around. And by the way, if you ever visit Las Vegas, give Zappos a call. They actually will have someone come to your hotel or at the airport to pick you up and give you a 30 minutes tour. And mentoring is another way that supervisors and co-workers, sometimes from a different department, may actually pair up with new hire as mentor and mentee to kind of share in a more informal setting the in and out and some of the subtle things about the organization, which may not be in the employee handbook. And for a while, actually, CI for new faculty member, we do have a mentoring program, which I participate as a mentor to help a colleague of mine, and most people who participate seems to benefit greatly from this mentoring program. And certainly the last is try to figure out yourself. But since you're now aware of there's such things called organizational culture, pay attention to it, pay attention to the invisible elements of organizational cultures to understand it. Leadership certainly has a great influence over organizational culture. I think this is one of the greatest contributing factor for the formation of organizational cultures. And because leader has their powers, positions, and also there may be they are in charge of the reward or punishment of employee who may behave good or bad. And so I will argue leaders are responsible for the fostering of cultures. And certainly culture are formed by everybody in the organization, but leaders carry special responsibility. And part of the leader's influence over culture is through role modeling, which means that how they manage, how they make decisions, how they treat others, how they deal with customer, provide a role model, and which will be imitated by the subordinates. And leaders shape culture by their reaction to special events, how they treat other people around them. Leaders shape culture by particularly to not just those actions, but to crisis and through some of the major decisions. I remember there's a security company, some engineer made a major mistake in experimenting with the software, try to create something new, but by accident create a bug which cost the company millions of dollars. And however, the top management decided to protect this employee. He was not punished, and only a few people know who he or she is. And because they didn't want to really punish this employee, because he or she really tried to be creative and do something different and try to invent something which may help the organization. And they treasure that a lot. And so even though the company, as a result of this bug, cost them a fortune, but they decided that to stand their ground in terms of encourage innovation. And this definitely sent a major message to everybody in the organization. Let's look at a kind of Asian Chinese example from the analect. You can see the translation here. The story was very short. You will find out actually in the classic Chinese, there's only about, let's say, 5, 6, 9, 10, 11, 12 words. Basically, the translation is that the stable were burned down while Confucius was attending the official duty at the king's court. When he returned, he was informed about the fire at the stable, his family's stable. And so his first reaction is has anybody been hurt? And he did not really ask for the situation about the horses. I do believe Confucius probably asked about the horses afterward, but his first reaction is, has anybody been hurt? And that's important. This is not rehearsed. This is really the first response, the instant response in the crisis situations. And this is where you can really tell what's the priority of the leader, and that sends a really strong message. And this is when you know what is true priority from the leaders. Reward certainly influence cultures. The type of behavior that are rewarded or ignored in organizations set the tone for the cultures. For instance, people may be getting raised based on their behavior, performance, attitude, result, like they reach sales goal, so they're getting the deserved bonus. The performance, manager may rate their task performance, and sometimes people may be rewarded for their seniority, because we do promote loyalty to a certain extent, and seniority is one way you reward people who are loyal to the organizations. And for instance, in Japan, a lot of company has this lifelong employment agreement. It's probably not formal, but pretty much if you work for like Toyota after college, you will be there forever. You certainly have a chance to be promoted step by step. So that's one way they do reward people is really based on their seniority. This loyalty does count in certain organization. In the Western culture, in the US, particular loyalty doesn't seem to mean that much by comparison. And some people may be getting raised because they have they're the lunch buddy of the boss or the boss's boss, or they play tennis together. Then they get raised more than others. That will become an unfair situation, which may not be so desirable in terms of maintaining a proper culture in the organization. We did mention briefly, but this is the 7 dimensions of organizational cultural profile. You can describe an organizational culture along this 7 dimensions or 7 distinct value, which include innovative culture, detail-oriented culture, team-oriented culture, people-oriented culture, stable culture, outcome-oriented culture, aggressive culture. Together, if you measure it through some instrument, you will get a sense of the organizational culture profile of an organization. And this is one of the original articles describe this approach and how it's used in measuring or the person organizational fit. You can download the article here. And this is actually an article published by in Australia Defense Department, I believe. They use the same instrument, the organizational culture profile, to help them to understand the culture of one of its agency. So remember the 7 dimension in OCP, organizational culture profile. And we can use the profile to measure the fitness of an individual employee with its organizational cultures. And whether the assumption and value of the person match the assumption and value of the organization. So we do use the OCP to measure the organizational culture part, and also we also use the SAM instrument to measure the cultural orientation of the person or the employee. So current employee will rate how well the value statement describe the organizations, and the individual will rate how well the statements describe their value. And then together with the information collected, we can kind of measure the person organizational fit from the culture perspective, and use it as the basis of the attritions for the ASA framework for attraction, selection, and attrition. Employee with high fit are more likely to have high job satisfaction and may stay longer, be a more loyal employee. Employee with low fit are likely to dislike the job and look for a new one, may not stay for long. The mechanism of conducting this is a little bit more complicated, so this gives you just a sense of how it is done. For instance, you will be asked to rank the following characteristic, which is listed here, of the workplace culture from the most to least important to you, and depends on your answer. Certainly there are more than this 7 statements here, value statements. Were kind of simplified to give you a sense. If the organization, if you describe the workplace culture to be risk-taking, then it may be a more innovative cultures. If precision is important, it may be detail-oriented cultures. And so we can kind of map the value statement to the 7 dimensions of the cultural profile. So those are the instruments kind of used to map to the culture dimension in terms of organizational cultural profile. Highest rank show that organizational culture are most important to you if you rank high. This is only about 7 out of the 54 statements, which I managed to found the original article was this 54 value statement. It's been all listed here. I'm not going to go through it, but it's give you a sense like you can describe the organization's cultural profile using those value statement and eventually narrow it down to 7 different dimensions of an organization's culture. And other than taking this test, this has to be done once you've been in the organization. But if you're looking for a job and try to figure out the organization culture, or if you're new in the organization, try to figure out its organization cultures to determine whether you should stay or whether you should take the job. You need to conduct your own research. During your interview, maybe observe the physical environment and try to read between the lines what people tell you, reflect on how you were treated during the interview, and certainly ask proper questions, and eventually listen to your gut feeling. Another way, a modern way of figure out the culture of organization is go and visit some website which allow employees to leave comment about its company. Glassdoor has been around for quite a while, has review sections. If you go to Glassdoor and you can type in the company name for particular locations, and then you will find reviews and rating of the company you're looking for. Please do it as an exercise. Go and find the company that you admired and that you think you want to kind of pursue as to see whether they have a job for you. But before you do that, do this exercise to find out its culture, see how current or sometimes former employee were saying about this company. Indeed is another website which you can find similar information. So last not the least, there's person-organizational fit. Certainly is important from the organizational viewpoint to find the right employee for the organization and fit its organizational cultures. At the same time, it's also important for you to work for an organization that subscribe to your own belief and value systems. You need to, when you start a new job, you try to gather informations and talk to people, and try to find out more, attend meeting, pay attention what people are saying, and also manage the first your first impression upon others. In some study, I think it's in an earlier chapter from the textbook, the first impression can be quickly forms, and certainly you can kind of perform diligently and doing great job and to impress people. But here I would like to just give the following suggestion. When you're new in an organization, you may want to keep a little bit low profile at the beginning. In the Chinese way, we call it be a hidden dragon. Dragon doesn't have a negative connotation. In the Eastern culture, is an animal, a mystic animal that's liked by many in China. And so here, the hidden dragon, I believe there's a movie called Hidden Dragon and Crouching Tiger by Anne Lee. Really means keep a low profile. Don't show off too soon, or certainly you need to perform, but try to see how other people are doing their job. Sometimes you may end up finishing a job, and existing employee may take a week and you finish in 2 hours. That will be a great embarrassment to the employee. They may not like what you did. But if you reflect on, once you know more about it, you will find out maybe you did it quickly because you didn't really fully test what you have done. You may not put all the necessary requirement into the production process. And at the same time, you may upset someone. That may not be a good thing. Manage relationships. Go to lunch with your colleagues. That's where you would really get insight what's going on. I do that all the time, and ask people what's really going on. Because a lot of times I don't pay too much attention what's going on the political side of the organizations. And attend organizational events, in our case, like faculty meetings and some celebrations. Seek feedbacks from your direct managers or some trust colleague. And also, you certainly want to show success. Gradually, I would put instead of early on, don't be too eager to show success, but you definitely want to demonstrate your ability, but observe the environment first and then demonstrate your ability and at the right time. And so this is some practical tips in terms of fitting in based on the person organizational fit. So organization cultures, most of the elements are invisible and difficult to observe, and it will forms and affect the success or failure of an organization. It's a very important part of the management functions, and as a leaders or even as an employee or as a job seeker, we do need to pay attention to organization culture. I hope the two lectures just delivers are helpful for you in understand organization culture, its importance, and then how it was an organization culture may be forms and evolve. That's it. Thank you. Bye bye.